make sure that the soil isn't contaminated. So now you'd have to find out where you can get soil testing done and how much it costs and how long it'll take. All right, next, Marcus.
Obtain loan approval in writing as soon as possible.
Okay, well, so that's a process, isn't it? Our loan process has several steps. Number one, you gotta get an up-to-date and accurate pre-approval letter. That's the first step. The second step is you're gonna get conditional loan approval about 2/3 way through the escrow process. And there's a date for that, and you can't let that date go by. It's your job to make sure it happens on that date or to write an extension for it. And the third thing is you're gonna get final loan approval. And final loan approval should happen somewhere around 8 days before closing. Again, your contract will say so. Your timeline will tell you, my final loan approval is due. So there are numerous loan dates. Wow.
Negotiate for repairs and treatments. After inspection, use amendment to request repairs and treatments. If there is a contingency period, this should be done before the dates in the contract.
Right, this is tricky. So you've got 14 days in your inspection period, and you wanna get this inspection done early so that your client can not only be present, so how's this work? Let's say the home inspector is gonna take 2 hours to go through the whole property and inspect it. You have your client come for the last half hour, and the home inspector is gonna take your client through the house and point out the things that were issues. And then the home inspector has this handy dandy program, and they generate a report within, at the most, 48 hours. Usually you can get it within 24 hours, but at the most 48 hours. You're gonna get an extensive report, or your client is, that explains the things that were discovered, and this is in good condition, and this is in good condition, and this is in moderate condition, and this here needs repair. And hopefully the report actually has a list at the end of all of the 27, 47, 87 items that the inspector feels need to be addressed. And what happens is sometimes people go to the home inspection and they get so excited and they go, okay, I'm fine with everything, let's go. I'll approve my inspection, can we just move on? Well, it doesn't speed things up any. It doesn't make the lender work any faster. So there's no benefit in rushing to approve your inspection period. And I say, no, we're not done yet. So now I make sure my client goes home, sleeps, gets the report, reads the report, and now with a sober mind, as opposed to all the excitement for having been in the unit, now looks at that report and says, oh, like this really bugs me. I'm realizing this really bugs me. I don't want the garbage disposal to be making that funny noise. Like, I want a new garbage disposal. It seems kind of gross to take over somebody's garbage disposal anyway. So, okay, garbage disposal. What else bugs you here? And you go through the list and you find out that the exhaust valve on the hot water heater is not installed properly. This is a very common problem. And that's a safety issue. And you find out that the kitchen plugs in the kitchen counter aren't GFCI plugs. And GFCI plugs are the ones that have those red and white buttons and the reset button, right? So there's safety. They're like putting the tripper right there at the thing, right? So there's safety features. You should not sell any property that doesn't have those. So
you have to be anywhere where there's near water.
You have to, so you don't even want to close without that, right? You want it's a minor thing. They cost $6 a pop. It'll take an electrician a half an hour to put them in, or a handyman. So you just want to make sure that you negotiate that all the bathrooms and kitchens have GFCI plugs. So those are safety matters, right? So you can add those to the list. And now your client might have 2 or 3 other things. I think I mentioned the other day I had a client, and there were 3 cracked tiles on the bathroom vanity, and she was really like, I can't believe I'm spending $1.5 million and my bathroom vanity is gonna have cracked tiles. I said, I'll fix those for you. So we asked for those to be repaired, right, and whatever. So you gather this list and you make the list together, and now you go and submit your form with the request for these 5 items that you've agreed to the listing agent. And now the listing agent has to go to the seller and say, well, they're requesting you make these 5 repairs, and the seller says, I'm not making any repairs, or whatever, I can't do anything, or okay, yeah, I guess I'll do those, and do I have to do them all? You know, well, so there's a little negotiation that happens. You might go a little back and forth, right? So you want to allow yourself enough time in your 14-day period to have 3 or 4 days at the end of the 14 days to do this. You don't want to be asking for repairs the day before on the 13th day. Because what if the lister says, I'm not extending this, I'm not extending your inspection, no, I'm not doing it. And suddenly your client is sitting there and the time expires. The contract says that on the inspection, it defaults to acceptance.
Yep.
If nobody does anything, if you don't cancel the contract, it's going to default to acceptance. So you don't want it to do that. You want to negotiate this in advance. So timing is really important, and our being on top of the timing is really important. All right, back to you, Shaylin.
All right, schedule survey if necessary within deadline and contract.
No, again, this belongs over onto the listing agent's side. In our contract, the listing agent is responsible for surveys. Now, sometimes the seller says, I'm not paying for a survey, I'm not doing a survey. And the buyer decides to just do it. And you might, but very rarely. This is usually the listing agent's job. Now, when you do a survey, just so you know, your clients are going to want to know what the cost is. So you get quotes from several surveyors, and you have to fill out forms and submit forms, and then they get back to you. And so it's a little bit of a process to you don't just call a surveyor and hire them, because this guy's going to charge you $800. Well, this one's only charging $6 25, and your client says, I'll take the $6 25 one, or this one can do it in 2 weeks. This one's going to take 5 weeks. Well, that's not in time. I need to go with the guy who can do it in 2 weeks. Right? Like that. Okay. Next, Cherish.
Schedule appraisal or another appraisal has been scheduled.
Yeah. So who schedules the appraisal? Do you guys know?
Lender? Lender?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the lender does. So what we do is we want to make sure that the appraisal has been scheduled. And we actually have a little reminder about that on our timeline so that we can remember to do that. Okay, next.
Schedule closing appointment if necessary, when? The week of closing.
Right, so kind of like I said here, the escrow company and the lender do that, so we just want to make sure we're included. That's really what we're trying to do here. All right, Marcus.
Final walkthrough with buyer. After repairs and treatments are complete.
Well, there's actually a due date in our contract for the final walkthrough.
X
And
number of
again,
days before it closes. No, 5
this is
days.
like I told you in that sequence, people like to go look at the place before they send their money in and before they sign documents. So it usually happens at 5 days. And that's how our contracts are written. And so it's a deadline. Now that deadline, just like the inspection period says, if you don't cancel, if you let this date expire, you've defaulted to acceptance.
Acceptance.
It's done. So if you do not do your final walkthrough on the 5th day, or if you're not satisfied and you want to come back, you need to extend it. It's one of those interesting little tidbits.
Can I throw something out?
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I was always taught this. Don't you take responsibility for the final walkthrough. Either the buyer does the final walkthrough, or that, even better than that, the people that did the home inspection, for a modest amount, they will come back and do the final inspection and see if the 3 things that you asked to be fixed were indeed fixed. And they'll sign off on it. So in other words, if they did the inspection for $400, they'll come back for $75 and do the final walkthrough and make sure that the 3 things that you asked to be fixed were actually fixed. That way you're not taking the responsibility for this final walkthrough. Oof.
In most instances, we have clients on island, so they're there to do it themselves. And we go with them. We definitely, as Bob says, do not ever do this for our client. We tell them to hire the inspector. Good point. Thank you so much. Coordinating move-in dates, well, when can the buyer move in?
After recordation.
Yeah, on the morning of, so recordation happens at, by 8 o'clock in the morning, and by 8:30, you're gonna get a phone call from escrow, says, congratulations, your transaction recorded, and you can now, you've made arrangements with the listing agent to get the keys, and you're gonna go pick up the keys, and you're gonna go put a bottle of champagne in the house, and meet your buyer there at 10 o'clock, and they've got a house. Yep. Next, Bob.
Confirm that the loan will fund on time for closing.
Well,
Oh, baby.
Yeah.
Be talking to your lender, make sure that loan is gonna fund. Should know that several days before closing, that it's gonna fund. The funds are already there, they've been transferred.
The funds should be there no later than 2 days before closing. That's the day the funds usually arrive. The bank doesn't like sending money early.
Right.
And you don't want them to, because the moment the money is sent,
Interest.
your buyer is accruing interest. So, for sure. So it's just a matter, it's just keeping in touch with the lender, your lender, and making sure that everything is going smoothly. All right. Sheldon's gone. Cherish, next.
Have client review closing disclosure for accuracy 3 days prior to closing.
Okay, so this is interesting. For us, this happens 6 or 7 days prior to closing. This is why it takes us to do an 8-day closing. They should actually, and that's what, I prefer 8 days. So here's how this works. The law now requires the lenders to provide a final loan disclosure, and the buyer must have 3 days to review it. Must, period. So now they get this document on the 8th day. On the 5th day, they approve it. Now, the lender can take those documents, that approval, and print out all the loan documents that need to be signed. And on the 4th day, the client can come in and sign all the documents. On the 5th day, the day before that happens, your client is going for their final walkthrough, right? So you see how this works. So that's why we need 8 days. So then the final loan disclosure is approved, the documents are drawn up, the client does their final walkthrough, the client can sign the documents, the client can deposit their down payment into escrow, and now escrow can go to closing. Has 3 days to go to closing. Okay, so for us, this 3 days is more accurately stated as 8. Attend the closing.
Could I throw something
Yeah,
else
yeah,
out?
yeah.
Watch out if you have a closing that is scheduled around a holiday, like a state holiday or a national holiday or a Hawaii holiday. Be careful.
So we have a wonderful timeline that tells you when things fall on a holiday, or on a weekend, so that you don't schedule things that way. What Bob is referring to is when you have a closing around Christmas, people take time off, things slow down, So, and you can kind of anticipate that. On the other hand, I had something close on December 24th this year, and somebody else had a closing on December 28th. So it's not like it doesn't happen.
It happens.
It's just, you just want to be aware and kind of let your client know. What gets a little iffy is if your client says, I must close in this year, in 2019, cannot go into the next year. And you're like, oh my God, right, you've got 3 days it's really tight. So that gets a little scary. So if that happens to you, you want to like run that escrow really tight to make sure you get done early. And we write our purchase contract to say closing can happen on or before 45 days or 30 days from acceptance, whatever you. So the idea is that, hey, if everybody can close early, are you okay with closing early? Well, it depends if the seller's in there and has to move out, But if it's vacant, it's a vacation rental condo, sure, close. So you can close early. All right, Bob?
Attend closing.
Yeah.
Required in some states, closing day.
Isn't that interesting? Some states require the agent to attend closings. I think it's a good idea, actually.
A lot of times here, you're gonna have a buyer and I've got a buyer right now in California and the sellers in Canada, and neither one of them is gonna attend closing.
No, of course not. They're doing it remotely, absolutely. And then final is receive your payment.
Get paid.
Well, so that's why we have that escrow class, because in order to get paid, you must have a complete file here. All of the documents that require your buyer or seller's signature, all the approval forms that we require of you have to be in the file so that you can get paid. And that again is why we call the class escrow and how to get paid. So we show you that. Now let me tell you something here. This is all very nice and theoretical, and by the time you actually have a closing, you may have forgotten a lot of this. So be aware that you're gonna wanna take the class, escrow on how to get paid, to get familiar. But if you don't have a closing for a couple of months, take it again when you've got something in escrow, okay, to refresh yourself.
You have it every month, you said?
Every month, it gets on, it's on the calendar every month. All right, I'm gonna take us through the listing side, just go a little quicker. Open title.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Submit contract and earnest money to title and escrow, right? Deliver earnest money to, no, we had the buyer did that, because they're the ones who have the money. Coordinate inspections, in other words, the buyer is gonna set up inspections, so now the listing agent gets called for the appointments and has to make the facility available and arrange for the inspections with the seller, right? So that's what the listing agent does. Receive written confirmation on loan approval. Yep, you wanna make sure that the buyer is meeting all of their deadlines. That's what the seller has to do. Are you doing everything you're supposed to be doing on time? Conversely, if the seller has to schedule a termite inspection or has to schedule a survey, the buyer can say, are you doing that, right? So, and those things, we move them from the buyer's list to the seller's list here, so they're not actually listed here. Negotiate repairs and treatments. This is really important because sellers often don't want to do repairs, right? They're just going, "Arr." So it's really good to prepare your seller beforehand and say, so just want to let you know that oftentimes buyers request repairs. There is nothing in this document that requires you to make repairs, but sellers often do. It helps the process along, and you know, you can kind of figure out, like, would you like to buy a house that has this thing going, you know? So let's just wait to see what the buyer asks of us. I just wanted to prepare you that you can anticipate that this might happen. It helps a lot when you warn people that they might get a request for a repair, even if there's an as-is addendum.
Yep.
Even if there's an as-is addendum.
Can I throw something out that's worked for me in the past? Is I've said to both the seller and the buyer, you're gonna get a list of items from the home inspection that's 20 items, because their job is to find stuff that's wrong. And depending who you get to do the inspection, you'll get things that the screw in that plate was turned sideways and it should have been turned up. I mean, seriously, okay? But there's gonna be 20 things. 16 of them are gonna be minor. 4 of them are gonna be worth fixing. So the good news is, you don't have to fix all, you only have to fix these 4. And if you say that to the seller ahead of time, they're gonna go, oh, okay. If you say that to the buyer ahead of time, they're gonna go, oh yeah, this minutia, I can do that, but I want him to fix the leak under the sink. Okay. And then that way they're prepared. It's not a surprise when they find the leak under the sink, the seller's already says, yeah, I'll fix it, or I'll give him a credit, or whatever. You grease the skid so that when the inspection comes, it's not like, nobody told me about this, you know. Well, no, tell them about it way before you do the inspection. You know, it just helps to make it smoother. So.
All right, thank you. Yep, that's true. All right, schedule survey, ensure appraisal has been scheduled. So we actually recommend you check on that at about 7 days, 5 or 7 days. I mean, that lender should be on it. The moment this is a contract, that buyer should be applying for the loan, and the lender should have requested an appraisal, because you don't want the appraisal to hold up the process, right? Coordinate move-in dates, okay, sure, seems a little early, but You also need to, one of the things we haven't talked about in this at all is seller's disclosure. We have a seller's disclosure law here that's pretty strict, and the seller has to submit the seller's disclosure. The law is for the seller. The law is not for us. The law says the seller must disclose everything they know about the property. We happen to have a form that makes it easy for the seller to do that, but it's not, I'm not making you do this, it's the law that's requiring you to do this, right? So the seller has to fill that out, and then the buyer has to review it and ultimately sign off on it. Sometimes there's questions that go back and forth to clarify some things. What you're trying to do is convey everything that the seller knows about the property, including the repair history. So that's another item that gets taken care of here. So then you want to open the house up for final walkthrough. Of course, before that is you want to make sure that the seller made any repairs that the seller agreed to make, right? And if 15 days before closing, you contact the seller and say, so did you make those 3 repairs? And he goes, no, gosh, I haven't gotten to that yet. Would you like me to help you? Would you like me to hire a handyman to come in and do those things? In other words, if you leave it too late, you can't help, right? And then all of a sudden you get to the final walkthrough and the repairs weren't done. Ay, now you've got a bit of a mess. So you don't want to go there. So help your, like right up front, go, do you want me to help you with this? Do you have a plumber that can do that? Or do you have a person who can do that, right? And you, if you don't know a plumber, then ask fellow agents, put it on Facebook. Anybody know a good plumber in Kihei? You'll get lots of answers. Coordinate the final walkthrough, have clients review the closing disclosure to ensure accuracy and debit and credit. So they, it's the final closing statement, and it's gonna say exactly, here's what you're gonna get. Here are your expenses, here's your closing costs, and here's the commission that you're gonna pay the realtors, and here's the loan that you have to pay off because you still owe $150,000 on your mortgage, and so out of the $400,000, you're going to get $257.47. Yeah, whatever, right? And the guy goes, "Oh my God, I got out. Let's hope he gets $247,000." You go to closing. Now the closing, like I said, for the seller is really easy. It's really quick. It's just a couple of things to sign. So it's not a big deal at all for the seller, but it's still courteous and nice to go. And finally, just like for the buyer, you need to finish your file in order to get paid. It's the same requirements, just the seller's version. Cool. All right, now you guys can kind of pair up and go through this list of potential problems and just have a conversation about how might you possibly solve them. So so here's how this works. The first column is contract to close issues, inspection and repairs. There are some surprise findings. What would be some solutions there, right? Come up with some ideas. The report is complex or confusing. What would you do if the report is complex or confusing? There are costs, and who pays for it? How do you resolve that? See the point? So just go through, just have a chat about some of those. We've got 15 minutes to discuss some of these ideas. Come on over here. Work with Bob. He's gonna come over here. Girls, you working versus boys? You all right with this?
Yeah.
Alright,
Okay.
inspections and repairs, so surprise, be a surprise finding inspection or repairs.
Okay.
Inspection,
Yeah.
repairs, surprise findings.
Yeah.
More,
Those are always fun, by the way.
So,
so the surprise is probably
solution maybe would be
more
to
like,
see if they
yeah.
have a contractor or somebody who can help fix that, and if they don't, then make sure that
trust them,
you get in touch with that person.
Well,
no matter what, call a professional.
Way before this happens, regardless if you represent the buyer or the seller, I would tell them there's going to be an inspection. Okay, let's say you're the seller. there's gonna be an inspection.
Report is complex or
You have a
confusing.
condo, okay, so
Broker.
there's gonna be an inspector that's gonna come in and check everything out.
Yeah,
And-
consult with your broker.
Just, again, this is a little bit off the beaten path. If you have a condo, there are certain inspectors that you wanna get. If you have a $10 million home on the ocean, there's a guy that is just nuts. That's the guy you want, that guy, okay? Because, you know, it's not a $400,000 condo, it's a $10 million property on the ocean. So you want the guy that's gonna take forever, okay? But ahead of all these things, you wanna tell both the buyer and the seller, there's gonna be a home inspection. They're gonna come up with a list of things to do and that need fixing, and you might not be aware of it. There might be some surprises in there. But I'm gonna tell you ahead of time that there might be some surprises, so now all of a sudden, it's not such a big surprise. Alright?
Grease the wheels.
Grease the wheels. Grease the wheels, exactly. Now, it doesn't mean that they go, oh my God, I didn't know that was leaking. You know?
Have a timeline?
So what are we gonna do? I'm an old project manager, that's what I did back for 25 years. What you do is you plan for contingencies and then what your response is gonna be if that happens. So, if there's 20 things and 3 of them need repair, are you willing to repair those, Mr. Seller? Well, yeah, I don't wanna turn over a place that's leaking. Oh, no, I don't wanna do that. So you need, if you know that ahead of time, you go back to your buyer, or, you know, you tell your agent, the other agent, or you, if you're in Dublin, go back to the buyer and say, look, if there's any like major deals, surprise things that are happening, my guy feels as though he's giving you the greatest price and then they can go and grease the wheels before the report ever comes out. So, see what I'm getting at?
Sure.
So it's prepared for the surprise findings, okay? But you're right. That's exactly what you do.
Okay, so I'll put
Price,
prepare ahead of time.
so like.
Yeah,
the seller
whoever your
doesn't
client
agree
is,
with the
prepare them that there's gonna be a report. And they're gonna find stuff that's wrong. Because if they don't find stuff that's wrong, it's like they didn't do their job. They're gonna find stuff that's wrong.
So I think reviewing right?
Step 1, prepare it well ahead of time.
Yeah.
Reviewing to
Step 2,
see why that was why that came up, or
get
reviewing
them
inspection.
in touch with a contractor or some handyman that can help fix this.
No. A lot of times people here don't know who to get. I don't know what officially KW's position is on this.
Just move on, you don't need to solve it
Yeah.
in great detail, so I already said, put it on Facebook, you need a handyman, you need a painter, you need a plumber, you need an electrician, go on Facebook, ask people.
Yeah,
We got lots of people here who know handyman.
but don't give them a list of 1 to get. Give them a list of 3 to get, and let them pick.
Okay.
No, you don't need to do that either, so here's the
Really?
thing on that, Bob.
Yeah.
The courts assume that any name you give is a recommendation. If you give 2 names and you know nothing about that guy,
Right,
and they do shoddy work, and
Right.
that person comes after you, the court's gonna say, you recommended that guy. So they would rather see you only give 1 name, but you know the relation, and you say, this guy's done lots of good work for me, I know him well, I trust him. Then they would
Yeah.
have you give 3.
rather,
Yeah.
rather than giving 3 and letting the client pick it.
That's correct, because the implication
Well,
is
then that makes my life a lot easier, because
That's
I know
correct.
exactly who I do for inspection.
then you
and I
tell
know
your
what-
client that, I can
Yeah.
give you 3 names, however, I only trust 1. Which one, what would you like? Would you like to pick out of the list
Okay,
of
well,
3?
that's easy then.
Yeah.
That's easy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Understand.
fantastic,
Yeah.
because when I started, it was give them 3 names, let them pick,
It
don't
is.
you pick, don't you,
Yeah.
you know? So, wow, okay.
So to report is complex or confusing. Talk to your broker, get an appointment with the inspector, and have them go over it with
I
you.
think,
How about go back to the guy that wrote the
kinda what
report
I'm
and
going
make it
through now
simple?
is like,
I
see
The
if
report is
it's
confusing,
accurate,
dude.
right? So
I guess
like
that's what I meant by
properties
get in
that are on
contact
CMA
with
are
the
smaller than the properties that I'm
inspector.
selling,
Yeah.
but it's in the same neighborhood,
Yeah.
so it's like.
If
it's
the
not
report's
gonna match,
confusing,
you know what I mean?
go back to the guy that wrote the report.
Different,
Hey.
so it's like
Have inspector
explaining
simplify
it
and
in detail,
explain
so like revisit detail.
costs and who pays. Well, we would refer back
Used in
if there's any
CMA
credits or anything that were issued
And then the
before,
market too, so like CMAs or.
and settle those ahead of time, and then I assume it's sort of a negotiation.
Sure it is.
Yeah.
Sure it is. Is the seller gonna fix it? Is the buyer gonna fix it? Are they gonna go half and half? Is the seller gonna get the credit? Yeah,
Previous credits.
Maybe like Marion's example, the buyer doesn't want the seller to fix it, because look at how they kept the property.
Yeah, gotcha.
It's a great example. Dude, you don't want this guy fixing stuff.
Timetable for repairs goes wrong, to your broker about getting,
Yeah, so I guess speak to the lender,
about,
understand why.
contingencies, maybe find the other, repair people.
When did you find out that the repair wasn't gonna meet its timetable, is the question. Did you find out the day that it was due, or did you find out, how are we doing on that? We're 5 days ahead of when this is supposed to be fixed, how are we doing? Gonna get it fixed in time?
Figure out.
Or we can.
Again, I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh,
I would look and think, I want the hot water heater replaced, and the seller says, yeah, I'm gonna replace the hot water heater, and you know who the plumber is. There's nothing wrong with, are we on track for this?
Following
How
up,
we doing on
Credit
this?
following up with the plumber
Well,
and
whoever,
making sure the timetable.
how we doing on the timetable?
Check
Gonna meet it?
Check on the timetable.
As opposed to finding out the day of that it didn't meet the timetable and trying to fix it, you know?
The buyer.
Check on timetable regularly.
Like, we speak to the vendor, but then it would be consummated by buyers.
Yeah.
I
like,
doubt
how would you-
about
Understanding
worthiness.
the bu-
That sounds like a problem for my psychiatrist.
Yeah.
I don't, that's a weird word, I
That's
don't
funny.
even know what that means.
Well,
Yeah.
in other words, the home inspector says that
Yeah.
the hot water heater is gonna fail. And the guy says, I bought it 6 months ago, what do you mean it's gonna fail? So the only other thing you can do about that is to have another inspector come in and see if that's.
So bring in another
Yeah.
inspector.
And you're gonna get this for big things like the roof, like the electrical system, plumbing. You're not gonna get it for
Probably not gonna be able to restart it.
freaky floor.
Yeah.
Okay,
So, yeah, okay, so this is.
and then appraisals, they won't support the price.
I have this right now where I have a buyer.
With different lenders,
Selling a property.
seek out different lenders.
Excuse me, a seller who's selling a property, and a buyer who's buying the property, and I'm representing both of them, they both agree to the price, but the price is the highest price ever at that particular resort. And the guy needs to get a mortgage. He's gonna put like $500,000 down. I said to him, what if the appraisal doesn't come in? And I'm gonna have to have this conversation with the seller too, what if the appraisal doesn't come in, it comes in $20,000 short? You can either absorb the $20,000, or you could meet the seller halfway, or you could not put as much, from the $450,000, you put $400,000 down, and keep 20 in your
Yeah.
pocket. So I told the buyer, just keep 20 reserved in case you need to all of a sudden come up with some more money. So the appraiser can screw up a deal, dude, just so you know. You can have a buyer and seller that wanna pay something for it, the appraiser comes in, the appraisal is
Somebody a
lower
lot. Yeah.
than what their agreed to price is.
Mhm.
Cause the bank won't fund, if the appraisal doesn't meet what you agreed to, the bank's not gonna issue a mortgage.
Buyer doesn't have full
So,
down payment.
that difference has to be made up somehow.
Because
See, won't
that's the
support the
seller,
price, won't support the
right?
loan. Appraisals,
like how she was saying.
they can mess stuff up, this is a tricky wicket.
Yeah, like,
Okay.
oh yeah, like a seller's
So,
credit.
Yeah.
Or like a
it
buyer's
seems to
credit.
me,
Or
that first
like,
off,
we
we're
can
also,
educate the,
with all these, we need to
educate the buyer
prepare them ahead of
about
time and
somebody
retry
else.
this is gonna
Exactly.
happen, this is
But for
possibly
some
going to
buyers,
happen. And just like you said, let them know that appraisers can kill a deal.
Well, I wouldn't say that, I would say, look, anybody that gets a loan, the bank needs an appraisal, okay? We want the appraisal to match the agreed price,
Okay.
we want it to match the agreed price. If it doesn't, then some adjustment needs to be made, so
Okay.
that you can sell the property, Mr. Seller, and you can buy the property, Mr. Buyer. Some contingency has to be made.
And I understand that with that example you gave, your supported, your, representative, so with the, seller,
Well, even if you're only representing one, let's say you're selling a house for one
The
point
next
2 million,
property.
and the appraisal comes in at 1.1.
Thank you, I've not.
you have to sell
And I was
it.
like, I should have gotten my goals.
Or the buyer come up, or they meet in the middle someplace.
Okay.
Or your deal blows up, and you don't want your deal to blow up, because then nobody's happy. Sellers aren't happy, buyers aren't happy, mortgage companies aren't happy, realtors aren't happy, nobody's happy. So you want the deal, you want everybody.
So I'm gonna put, prepare ahead of time, prepare everyone ahead of time, and possibly change the price.
Well, and if you're the listing guy, you might wanna have this conversation before you determine the price that you want listed at, so you can realize, Jim, that if you price this property too high, and the appraisal comes in below, you're gonna have to drop it anyway.
So would you in that case recommend an appraisal before?
You might, but then it's gonna cost them $1,000 or $800.
But they need to have it done anyway at some point.
Well, yeah, but if the seller, that's,
Like if there's two offers.
the buyer pays for the appraisal,
Yeah.
the seller doesn't pay for the appraisal.
Could you negotiate it as a credit, at the
You
later
can negotiate
date?
anything, sure, but that's why your seller should price the property well, not above what it will, not above what the market will bear, but price it correctly.
This sort of contingency is also leverage in that conversation. that you-
When you're having your pricing conversation with your seller, say, you know, and here's the deal. If you're listing a property that's $5 million, that guy's not gonna need a mortgage.
He's-
If you price a property that's a $600,000 condo, they're gonna need a mortgage.
Okay.
Okay,
You know what I mean?
anybody have any questions on any one of these issues, or find one that was particularly interesting?
Other contingency, short sale, relocation, estate approvals. Solutions for that?
Okay, so that's a good one. A short sale, do you know what a short sale is?
Yeah, is that when like they're going foreclosure and the bank just sells it for what? For less or for what is owed?
So it's actually the seller who's
Seller.
selling it for less than what is owed, and the bank approves
Got
that.
it, okay.
And short sales are not short. They're called short because you're short in the amount of money, but they're not short in time. So, right? So one of the things that you need to say to people who wanna take on a short sale is, do you have time? Cause this could take 5 months, right, to close. Cause the bank, so, that's what a short sale means. And, when you're representing the buyer on a short sale, that's okay. Your coach and your broker will work with you. When you are speaking to a seller who wants to consider doing a short sale, we would really prefer you partner with somebody who's done short sales before. And the second thing I advise people is, I don't work with clients on a short sale who want to sell unless they've seen an attorney first. It is not for me to decide that the best course of action for you is to sell your house short. You might think that's the best thing for you to do, but an attorney is gonna give you all the options. So please go see Kane and Hearn, you know, up in Wailuku. They're pretty much our specialists on foreclosure at this point and that sort of thing. So please send your clients to an attorney. Relocation, we don't do a lot of relos here. People don't get relocated by their company to Maui. It just doesn't happen, you know what I mean? So we don't get a lot of that. But in other parts of the country, obviously it's a big deal. Relocation companies, you know, relocate for companies. And if you get one of those deals, I mean, if you get that gig, like you become the agent in that area, shame, that's a really nice deal. Now, they're gonna want a piece of your commission, but hey, for all those leads, that is awesome, right? And estate approvals, okay, so this is about, if there are trustees involved, if there is a court involved, like if it's a bankruptcy. A bankruptcy is, everything stops and the court is now in charge of making all decisions on this property. So you need court approval And there's a process, and it's tedious, and again, you wanna make sure you work closely with your broker or and your coach on anything like that. What else? Other agent, bad advice, I love that, or bad communication. And you go like,
I
really?
heard this is common.
I was just gonna say, the reason I'm bringing it up is because it's not uncommon. So, the more that you can make relations with the person that you're gonna be working with, the better off it is. I actually recommend you call the person up and say, oh my God, thank you so much for the accepted offer. I'm so excited, we're gonna be working together. And I don't know you at all. Tell me something about yourself. And they're gonna go, huh? No, well, we're gonna be working together. How long have you been in real estate? Oh, 20 years. Oh, really? And where do you live? And do you have kids? And you know, make relations with this person so that that person feels a little bit of a connection to you. Then you tell them your part, right? It's so helpful. It's not just communicating with our clients. It's communicating with everybody for the purpose of a smooth transaction. So keep that in mind, and you might get better service out of that agent for having made relations with them. If you are not hearing from that agent, you need to go to your broker right away.
Yep.
Do not risk missing a deadline or something's happening. If you are not hearing, your broker will call the other agent's broker and go, yo,
What's the deal?
what's the deal, right? So do not be, and don't you become the non-communicative agent. Always communicate, even if you say, I don't have an answer for you yet. I'm so sorry. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Well, I need an answer. I understand, but we've got until tomorrow and I'll get you an answer by tomorrow. Whatever it is. Well, poor vendor selection, that's an odd one, isn't it? Okay, taking a backup offer. Yeah, poor vendors. Taking a backup offer, that's an interesting thing. So you're the listing agent and you've got an escrow going and somebody calls up and says, can I still show your property? Yeah, of course you can. So now that buyer says, oh, I love this property, I really want this property. What are the chances of it falling out of escrow? So the agent is gonna call you up and say, how's the escrow going? Anything going wrong? And you go, no, it's going okay for now, but we're still in the inspection period. I have no idea how it's going, really. So, yes, we'll take a backup offer. So in a backup offer, you're gonna get an offer and it's gonna say, this is for a backup position and this buyer will be in first position as a backup offer. And if the other deal cancels, then this one goes into becomes active, all that stuff. You have to fully negotiate it, price and everything, and get it all fully signed, and then it doesn't open escrow. You just hold on to it.
Right.
But it's fully executed, okay? A backup offer is fully executed. So some agents don't like them because they're work. It's work. Gosh, I'm so sorry.
The guy that bought the most property from me since I've been doing this, first property he bought, it was a backup
Yeah,
offer.
right, absolutely. Okay,
Get it
so
done.
let's move on. Closing information. I'm on page 22. There are a lot of moving parts to a closing. Prepare your buyers and sellers for closing by making sure they have and understand the information. Don't assume the buyer or seller remembers everything from your buyer consultation, right? So in other words, one of the things in that class I told you about that I teach, and I'm happy to send this to you, is in the class called A Real Estate Licensee's Responsibilities During Escrow. It's a CE class that gets offered 3 times a year. I just taught it 2 weeks ago. I give the agents something called a buyer and a seller communication plan, and it literally outlines for your client exactly what's going to happen in the various phases of the process. It also is technically your to-do list. It's literally, this is what you do. So I am happy if you're interested in receiving that. Let me know. Somebody get a piece of paper. There, we can use one of these, and you can put your name on the back, and I will email you those 2 documents. So in other words, letting your client know up front, this is what's going to happen now. And then in the next phase, you're gonna say, okay, now this is what's gonna happen next. And then at the end, you're gonna say again, now this is what's gonna happen here in the next 10 days. Just so you know, really specifically, people feel so secure, right? We all like feeling secure. Oh, I know what's going to happen. My agent told me everything. So that's what we wanna do here. And that includes important dates, right? Letting them know there's important dates here that we have to follow up on. Refresher on closing 101 guide from the buyer's consultation. Well, that's what I'm talking about with this communication plan. Copy of contract, make sure everything your client signs, remember the statute of frauds? Statute of frauds says that we have to give everything the client signed a copy to them. And you have to do it pretty promptly. So if you're using e-sign, an electronic signature, they're gonna get it. Anything they sign, they automatically get a copy of through e-sign. So you don't have to send it again. And the inspection report, that's the big one. That's what they're waiting for, is to review that, and I wanna make sure they review that. I review it too. So I give it to my client, I say, okay, you review this, and then I do the same thing with the seller's disclosure and the inspection report, same thing. And I go through them both and I go, well, this kind of bugs me, and this kind of bugs me, and I don't know what they mean by that. So I end up with 5 questions, or 5 concerns. And then I hear, what does my client think? And my client says, well, I didn't like this, and I didn't like that. And I go, wow, those are good questions, let's get that cleared. And how did you feel about this? He goes, oh no, I'm not worried about that. Okay, scratch that. And then I said, well, and I also had questions about these 2 things. He goes, oh, those are good questions, yeah, I'd like to know that too. So we just put our heads together, right? 2 heads are better than 1. And come up with the questions that we want to address. And the same thing with the home inspection report. I go through it, and I go through the list. I don't read the whole report, oh my God. There's a lot of boilerplate stuff.